we are going to get started in the theme of this panel is literally 2.5 years late. And so I am really, really honored to have these incredible individuals up here. If you thought that your definition of the youth digital wellness ecosystem was expanded in our last presentations, you ain't seen nothing yet, because we have some OG innovators from 2020 and 2021 that are going to tell you a little bit about how it's been growing their innovations in the past few years. And yep, right on cue, I'm going to get a little bit emotional, because just imagine it's March 2020 and you hired me. Big mistake, but just kidding. And I was like, oh, I'm so excited to do this event and we're gonna see these people in person. And then COVID had other plans. And so just to kind of keep the energy going, I kept telling innovators, we'll see you in a few weeks. We'll see you in a few months. And then when 2021 hit and we had our fabulous second cohort, there was a little bit of wind out of our sails, and we said, you know what, we're gonna see you when we see you. And we're really not sure when that is. And so it is like incredibly humbling, the fact that you have all made it here. And they all deserve a 2-day conference to honor them. So yes, thank you very much for being here. Thank you to our online live streamers for watching in. I want to do very little talking, and I really want to focus on all of these innovators that are creating this youth digital wellness ecosystem. So the first thing I will ask is if you guys can just go introduce yourselves and tell a little bit about what you're building, what you're creating. So thank you.
Awesome. I guess I'll start off. So first off, one thing to give credit where credit is due. It was supposed to be March 12th, 2020. We were all ready to come out here, and on March 9th, the plug got pulled. And to Headstream's credit, they did a pretty incredible job pulling amazing audibles to give us an experience. And of course, it wasn't an in-person experience. We were building a plane while flying, but turned out pretty great. So just for Headstream. But my name is Dr. Nathan Demers. I'm a clinical psychologist, and I was lucky enough to be a part of a team at Grit Digital Health who partnered with Hope Lab, I see some Hope Labbers here, to develop an app to combat the issue of loneliness. And we did that long before COVID, but obviously couldn't have been a better time in some ways. And our participation in Headstream was actually all about adapting that app from a college setting to a high school setting, and can get into the nuts and bolts about all that. But one really quick thing, if you all don't mind, could everyone turn to the person next to you, give that person a compliment, and then have them give you a compliment? Go ahead. I hope it's a stranger too. All right, I'm going to pull us back in really quick. So I know that's a little unorthodox way to do an intro, but throw in COVID, throw in all the challenges that youth are facing when they are trying to form meaningful social relationships, and it can be really easy to forget the very basic building blocks. That starting a conversation by giving and receiving a compliment can have as much positive benefits on our mental health, on pushing the needle in getting a deeper connection, as doing 15 minutes meditation, or actually really having a long, in-depth conversation. And that's what our app is all about. It's about getting students into the real world to practice these skills. And we meet them via technology, but then the goal is to get them off that technology and having real conversations. So thanks, I'm gonna pass it on.
Hello. Yes, applause. Or we have to do it in between everyone, so we'll do snaps. Yeah, exactly. Hi, everyone. I'm Mika Lejean. Pronouns are she, her. I'm the CEO and co-founder of a company called Edoru. But I was not originally working on Edoru when I went through Headstream. I was working on a company called 2Swim, and we were a mobile app focused on self-expression through social messaging. So really at the core, focused on creating opportunities for BIPOC, LGBTQIA+, and women-centric communities to find their people, have conversation. To Nathan's point, it was very, it was a heavy switch, as we all know, straight into virtual, especially when building a product like that. And we ended up sunsetting sunsetting 2Swim in late 2020 and started building Adoru. And it really at the core comes from a lot of these same ideas around self-expression and creativity for young people, but now through avatars and virtual fashion. So at the core, thinking about how do we enable young people to be their fullest selves online, and most especially if we build for the most, what we often consider to be like vulnerable populations, BIPOC, LGBTQIA plus youth and young women, what does it look like when they have the tools to transcend the physical world, which is not really welcoming, let alone often safe. I'm really excited to be here. I talk a lot, so I'm going to stop talking now because I'm sure I'll say a lot more later.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rachel Miller, and I'm the founder and CEO of Close Gap. And I'm so happy to be here. We're finally here. So my company, we built a daily mental health check-in for K-12 schools. So students are going through a really nice digital safe space where they're sharing their emotions, their energy level, whether or not they've eaten lunch or breakfast, what's going on in their peer group, basically anything that informs their lives. And we take that data and we make it available to teachers and school counselors and school social workers so that they can intervene in real time. So that's what we do. Our student user base 10x'd a few months after the pandemic hit, which was wild. And it's funny, we went through the cohort and so many people, as COVID first hit, so many people were like, oh, this could be a telehealth solution, and oh, you guys are gonna grow like crazy. And it was really quiet for a few months, and then all of a sudden we 10x'd. So it was a lot to navigate, but being in community and having these resources and advisory support was huge for us.
Hi everyone, I'm Annika Salme. I use she, her pronouns. I was in the 2020 cohort with these lovely folks here. I also live in San Francisco, so I'm now local. I run a nonprofit called Novely, and we publish literature for liberation. We're building the largest digital library of ebooks that are written by really talented, underrepresented teenage writers. And the funny thing is, I say that, but the way I talked about Novely was so different in 2020. Like, y'all are probably like, what? What is that? What are you talking about? And that's, I mean, I'm proud of what we're doing now. Like, to date, we've published 54 ebooks by phenomenal young people from across the country. And really excited that one of those ebooks, the first novella that we published, When We Get There by Alumni Gonzalez, who is this wonderful teen from Florida. His book just hit 2,700 reads. So it's just really cool to be, I just can't imagine like what it would be like to be like this young writer who can see visibly that their stories are having an impact on their peers. And something I've been really excited about now is our next step is to get these taught in classrooms by English teachers who really believe that young people deserve to see themselves and feel seen and represented by what they're reading, whether it's in a classroom or whether it's on their phones. But I'm just really grateful to be in this space, grateful, honestly, that we're still kicking. The past 2 years have been some of the hardest of my life, and I'm sure I'm not alone in that regard. So I'm trying not to take for granted that we're here in this space, that I can see these people in person for the first time, and that, you know, Novely's still going. So thank you all for being here.
Hi everyone, my name is Dr. Catherine Grill. I am the CEO and co-founder of a company called Neof. I'm also based here in the San Francisco Bay Area. I was in cohort number 2 of Headstream, so we were totally virtual. We came to Headstream, we had, I think, part of a product and launched the full app during, if I remember, yes, the full app during the program, which was really exciting. Neof is a self-guided app. We focus on a lot of health education, stigma reduction, and social emotional skill building for young people. We also work oftentimes in the schools and have the ability to do data sharing back to school counselors, to therapists. We have some AI for clinical care escalation as needed, and most recently launched a tool for educators, so a lot of mental health lesson plans and really integration into the classroom that we started working on during Headstream. So when we came to you all, we're about to launch our product. We had, I think, about 100 young people working for us, so we've done a lot of co-development with young people and learned some just great tips and tactics during Headstream about how to prioritize that co-development, and have since had about 400 young people come through the company and actually work with us, which has been awesome.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Diamarcy Cristal, or just DM. I'm the founder of Enlight App, and I just want to say, first, I was going through Headstream and finishing my senior year of college, and also through the pandemic. It was very brutal, but it was just amazing to have a community of people where I could go and just be myself. One of the most amazing things I loved was what we did this morning with like the mental health check-in thing. It was just amazing. So I just wanted to point that out. But my passion is, I came from a refugee camp in Tanzania, and I imagined amazing innovative schools in America where I was gonna ignite my potential. Then my teachers didn't really know me. They didn't know that I was an artist, that I was an innovator, that didn't know that I was an entrepreneur, built in from the refugee camp. And I hated that so much, and I built a product that allows teachers to become experts on their students by understanding who they are and giving students a chance to express their passions, their interests, their aspirations, the things that no one actually asks about. And through Headstream, one of the biggest things that I've learned was, I think working with the youth was just a very game changer, and I'm just really excited to continue doing that. It's something I've picked up, so.
Wow, thank you so much, all of you, for introducing yourselves. I really want to make this as much of a dialogue, and so this is a little sneak peek into essentially what's like a cohort call. We all shared our strengths, our weaknesses, our challenges, and this is no joke. It's might look really shiny and success on the outside, but it's a challenge you have to choose every single day. And so as much as you feel comfortable, I'd love for you to all share how that's looked like. You can talk about the highs, the lows, and then if we have a little bit of time at the end, I'd love to open it up for some questions from the audience if you have it. So without putting anyone on the spot, do I have any volunteers?
I'll go first.
Okay.
I think two thoughts come to mind when you ask that sort of prompt. One is around the difficulty of the decision to sunset what we were building with TwoSwim, and make the decision to commit full-time to Adoro. It's cutting out, but we're going to make it work. I also can project, so worst case, I'll just do that. Yeah, we have a lot of mics. I think, when it comes to the decision, let me actually start here. Headstream completely changed my life. I wouldn't be doing what I am doing now, quite literally, if I hadn't gotten into Headstream. My co-founder and I were like 5 minutes from being like, we're just gonna have to get full-time jobs and go work at insert big tech company, because we just, we don't know how we're gonna do this. And we got into Headstream, and we were like, we can actually build this and commit ourselves and make it something. And then everything went offline. Yeah, Headstream. Woo, woo, woo. And then, from like some of the very first calls, I remember we played these like fun speed, not like speed dating, but like, remember those calls we had? Yeah, okay, cool. So like we would like to go on quick like 2-minute breakout sessions and meet a bunch of people. And I remember I met Dr. Danielle Ramo, who was at Hope Lab at the time, and she was telling me about Hope Lab's work, and I was like, this sounds really cool. And then I started meeting more people from the community, and I was like, this sounds really cool. Swapping. And throughout the program, not only did I learn a ton, meet amazing humans who are part of this program, but I also got to connect with so many more folks from this like youth digital wellness ecosystem, which is quite literally an ecosystem in terms of every different kinds of player in the roles. And, through Headstream, I met the community at Hope Lab. For those of you who don't know, Hope Lab is an organization based here in San Francisco, hopelab.org. Special plug. I ended up getting a fellowship and acting as the entrepreneurial fellow in the year 2020 to 2021, which is also at the exact same time a way for us that my co-founder and I said, okay, we can commit to Adoru. If we're going to sunset it to swim and actually go full in on Adoru, this is the chance to do it. And with them, just as a refresh, with Adoru, it's a mobile app that lets you create a digital version of yourself. It looks and feels like you, a full extension of your identity, skin tones, physical body size, hairstyle, which is like a major thing for a lot of us. Being able to experiment and play with identity is so important. And through the work with Headstream, the learnings that we had, tapping into the Hope Lab community, we now literally this week just launched adoru.world on Instagram and all socials. And, the team is 17 people around the world. Our cap table is 85% women, BIPOC, and LGBTQIA+. Like, I don't know that would have been the same scenario 3 years ago had I not gone through the program. So we love Headstream here.
Happy to jump in since I was just handed a mic. I think one thing that was really challenging for us, and I think I speak for everyone, I know when we were in it, it probably felt very different than we're feeling now, is we all had these innovations that we applied to Headstream for, and then we were accepted in the cohort, and then the world drastically changed. So, we made an app that was all about getting off technology and meeting real people in the real world. And when March 2020 came, we're like, well, that doesn't seem all that ethical. So we, made the major decision to pull the app back, to roll it in and say, we're going to make this, we're going to do our team, to our credit, we did a 3-week sprint in partnership with Hope Lab and made everything virtual compatible. But that was a huge shift for us. And I think throughout the pandemic, throughout 2020, when, as we were talking about with Danny, 2 more weeks, we'll open back up, 2 more weeks. We kind of had to make the decision of how embedded do we make this virtual world thing, knowing that hopefully we're also going to open up. So I know that was something that we were wrestling with throughout our time in Headstream. And we were also, in my experience, really using Headstream as a space to cope as people as well. I think the theme of lived experience being just as important as professional experience was really loud and true. And I know that was really important for me to make sure I was doing the best, to make the best decisions for our company, for our product, to have that reach and impact. But it took me being here 2.5 years later to really be able to reflect on that.
Awesome. So when I started Headstream, one of the things that I was going into it was that we were about to receive our app. So I was going through development, and it never launched because pandemic. We was actually going through the pandemic. Ours was literally through the pandemic in 2021, and for me, one of the biggest things that I just cherish so much, and one of the things that I just continue carrying is the youth innovators. For me, it was one of the most impactful things having actual students, because although I was a student at the time being in college, I haven't been in a middle school class or a high school class for maybe 4 years. And so for me, just being able to connect with the youth and have a mentor like Scotty, I don't know if Scotty's in here, but and Scotty being able to actually guide us towards actually making an impact. Because one of the biggest things that I see as a differentiator with Headstream is that yes, there is, how are you going to sustain yourself? But it's impact first. For me, it's one of the biggest things that really, really resonated with me, and it's really just stuck with me of how do we make an impact? But I definitely also make enough money in a way to be able to actually sustain the impact that we're making is a shift that happened to me during Headstream.
Okay. I think one of the challenges for us, so I also come from a clinical background, and I don't know if any of you have worked in clinical care, but it can be very black and white. This is how we do things. This is how you need to do things. And that's been definitely a challenge for our organization. Even I was also just talking with Scotty in the back, who's a social worker, and we were talking about how in healthcare it's very much so do you have a diagnosis? Well, we can't treat you until you have a diagnosis, or are you in crisis? And there's this just like waiting and waiting until the young person is seriously in crisis, and how unethical that is. Even though I was trained as a clinician, I feel like I also had a little bit of, I like to think of the social worker background, and then I was focused on this public health perspective, and really wanted to address things from the point of prevention. And that was something that not only, hospitals, health systems, VCs were telling us you can't do, because high acuity services will make more money and you'll have a more profitable company. And it was just something we were hearing all the time, this just, no, you can't do prevention, you can't do education, you can't work within the schools. And when we finally got to Headstream, I felt like it was the first time that we got this permission to just say, just go with your gut, like do what you want to do. This is really about, right, this is the Innovation Festival, about innovating, about changing things. It's not just digitizing health systems that have been put in place before and that have, quite frankly, a lot of problems and a lot of inequities, but it's really about pushing the boundaries and about, that permission to, even though so many people in society, some of the decision makers, the people with money are telling you can't do it, having that permission to explore in a cohort with other people how to push those boundaries, and that was a big change for us.
I'm so glad you shared that, Catherine, because something, and I think I'm just reflecting on really the value of Headstream and the experience now, just because the past 2 years have been such a whirlwind. So I have a few thoughts, but I just wanted to touch on what you shared, which is Headstream really enabled us to think about our innovation through several different intersections. And so when we're looking at youth mental health, the average delay between the onset of symptoms and intervention is 10 years. That's insane. That is so unacceptable. And what we need to do, like a way that we start to solve that problem, is bringing in, okay, let's talk about education technology. Let's bring in behavioral digital health. Let's bring in all of these intersections and exist and navigate these things together to meet students where they are, because students or kids or youth aren't just in one space. Like, we actually have to be at all of those intersections if we're gonna build something that works. So I love that. We got that from Headstream too. I think the other thing I wanted to share too was just the startup experience itself, or the innovation experience itself, is so challenging, and some of the highs and lows, I'll start with the lows that we had at Close Gap at the start of the program, was we lost a few team members, and it was really hard because it felt like our company was gutted, right? All of our human capital kind of left the scene all at once, and there were absolutely moments where I thought, okay, we're not going to move forward. Like, in some way, this isn't, we won't be successful. We won't be able to make it to the next step. So just kind of reflecting in this moment on how challenging it is to create something that the world needs. And then having a pandemic, also that added layer of complexity, and just actually how truly challenging it was to be in that moment, and just being so grateful for the community. So yeah, I just wanted to speak to that quickly.
Am I the last one? Yeah. Okay. There's so much to talk about here. And build off of, but I think in terms of both highs and lows, like having to face two questions over and over, which is like, when do you have to let this one go? And also when do you need to essentially burn it all down and start over? I think these are really, really hard questions that I know a lot of innovators had to face over the past few years. And for us, that was very real, because we didn't start off as a publisher. Our initial product, and it's really funny to look at my slide deck from Headstream. What a trip. The product that we built was a mobile app where we partnered with writers who were already published and had their stories on our platform, and the forum around it was built to inspire students and encourage them to take action. So these stories were related to climate change. They weren't written by youth, and it was very different. And when we launched it, and then also the pandemic started, the last thing that students wanted to be told was that they had to save the world. And the feedback that we got was, we're just trying to get through the day. Like, I don't feel energized and inspired to get civically engaged. And I heard that loud and clear. And so that's why we realized, like, actually, being grounded in literature actually gave us an opportunity to use literature as a powerful tool for liberation and healing instead, which was so much more needed at that time and even now. So like having to sunset that initial product and start over, in a sense, was so difficult, but truly, like, it made the work so much better, but it doesn't take away how hard that was. But I'm really glad that we're so much more aligned. And then that second question that I'm sure a lot of us had to face, which was, when do you just need to let this one go and kind of like just accept the situation, and just flow with it, see what happens. Yeah, I think that's very real. And in 2021, like, I was so burnt out, like truly severely like burnt out. Like, I couldn't even remember like why I was doing what I was doing. Like, that's a tough place to be in. So something that I really appreciate about Headstream is the relationship that I built with our youth advisors. I talk about them all the time. Rachel and Maddie. Maddie actually still works with me and is on our team as our director of online learning. So all those teaching resources that I talked about around the ebooks, like, she's the one who develops them and works with students and the authors to make sure that they're student informed and teacher tested. So it's really crazy that, like, you come back to this point where to answer those two questions, like, stay grounded and working directly with students and talking to them. And Maddie has seen us through a lot, and is someone I trust so deeply to help me answer those questions. And she's so cool. Like, she's a junior at Caltech now, and like has been indispensable to me, just in like making these tough decisions. And I value her feedback so much. So I think the grounding that Headstream provided in like the actual audience that we're trying to serve, youth, like, it helps even when you're dealing with those difficult questions.
I just wanted to say, shout out to Headstream for finding so much untapped potential in like all these youth that they bring into like the communities that we're in. I do want to shout out Harini. She's also, like, as you were speaking, like, the value that she brought onto our team when we brought on our youth advisor it's been incredible. And I mean, she's part of my team. She's that. And for me, one of the biggest things that's been coming over and over again was, again, like what Anna said, how much I value her input, to where sometimes I'm putting her in front of people who have had 30, 40 plus years of experience, working. And sometimes I resonate with her where, like, I'm also just a student who just came out of college. And so it's been, again, shout out. Y'all is so good at finding these amazing youth and keep rocking on that.
Yeah, the talent has been incredible. And this goes back to that kind of permission that we've gotten from Headstream to break the rules. I've always been a rule breaker. When I was younger, I found a bunch of books in my mom's room about dealing with your difficult child. So I think that says a lot about me. But that just ability to break the rules, because even when I first moved out here, I didn't think about founding my own company. I actually went to a lot of other big mental health companies, some which are still around, some which are not, and I pitched them my idea and wanting to work with teens and having doctors on the team, and like every single one turned me down. Like, not a single company wanted to hire me. which was interesting, but it led me to where I am today. And when I think about that now, like the hiring process and just some of the bias in the hiring process, and even what sometimes you might have like advisors or investors pushing you for, this is on paper the type of person you should hire. Well, we at this point have had, like I said, 400 young people come and work at the company. And even our first full-time employee was a student, their first job out of school. And a lot of people were saying, you know, hey, that's a risk. Why don't you hire someone more experienced? You don't have a lot of budget to play around. And you know what? It was the best thing ever. Like, these are the people that have helped make the company so special and make it what it is. And that was something that we really learned from Headstream.
Is this on? Yes, perfect. So I guess another just challenge we experienced, I guess it was kind of a little bit during and post our engagement with Headstream. But again, going back to, we all had these ideas pre the world closing in 2020. We made this app, and it was an enterprise solution that we were launching initially to colleges. And in light of the pandemic, if you all don't know, I'm sure you can guess that higher ed really asked itself a lot of questions, and budgets really changed. And, you know, is higher ed going to be the sustainable thing that it is? And there was a big dip there with a lot of uncertainty. And it was a really challenging time for us to say, you know, is this B2B to C model the right move to be making? And our patience and persistence and sort of going back to breaking the mold really paid off. And now that we're between 40 and 50 colleges, which is great. And then on the high school side, you know, the high school world also got pretty rocked in that, in my biased opinion as a clinician, and I would guess most people here, prevention has never been more essential because more and more students were slipping between the cracks. But as we know, there was always also this really high acuity. So what was happening in the market is a lot of dollars were going to crisis services to trying to increase services, the number of clinicians available. And our argument is this isn't an either or, this is a treatment continuum, and we need to do both and. And with that persistence, we were able to say, you know what, if schools don't have the time, the resources, the budget, because they're worried about testing centers and quarantining, and the folks who normally do health promotion are being tasked with these other things, maybe there's some other ways that we can look around some corners. And unexpectedly, in getting into the high school market, we were able to tap into a lot of philanthropic dollars. So whether that's health foundations, we were lucky enough to get an Upswing grant, and we're working with another nonprofit in Colorado that's been able to say, hey, high schools, we know this is a real problem you're experiencing, the issue of loneliness, because it places students at higher risk for depression, substance use, suicidality, substance use, and dropout, but we know you don't have the time and resources to implement it. So we're excited to continue that model and continue a pilot, if you will, and prove out the value, and then ideally to be able to make that shift back as sort of the market and world hopefully return to some sort of new normal, which we don't know. But that's been a real thing that we've had to challenge and that we've been challenged by and just have to roll with. So we'll see where it takes us.
I'm going to say a thing, but I think it's slightly more tangential. But just on the fact that being part of the Headstream cohort and part of this larger community that we are all part of has been really interesting, because what we're building with Adoro is very much to a more traditional tech investor, more traditional like consumer technology. And so when I say to them, yes, it's like fun and it's exciting and it's fashion and it's cool, but it also in the back end has an impact pathway to measure the long-term mental health effects for young people, they're like, what? Like, either they glaze over or they're just confused and can't like they just have never interacted with so many different kinds of companies. And I think it's so exciting as folks from our cohorts go out into the world, and some of us pursue the path that is venture capital and are fortunate enough also to have investors who are amazing humans. I think it's been really interesting, personally at least, just to see, it's very easy to know really quickly if an investor is going to be someone I think we should partner with or not, because there has to be that values alignment. And I think for too long, so many companies have been forced to go down a path with investors who don't believe in the same future, the same vision that we want to see. And I think it's really powerful and really exciting, as I've been personally just going through this journey of fundraising with VCs and with angels, is that when I tell people about Headstream, I'm like, you should meet the folks at Headstream. You should meet everyone at Hope Lab. Like, really trying to bring more awareness to the general mainstream of VC to just like think about these things. You may not buy in on day one, unfortunately, but like let's get them there. And I think it's been really exciting just to see folks joining the community over the last couple of years.
Does anyone else want to expand on that? Funding is always a topic that's top of mind, and you brought up something that is very near and dear to Headstream, which is mission-aligned funding. So there is some advice that's like, if someone's offering you money, you take it. However, at Headstream, we say, not so fast. So I'm curious, what has the funding landscape looked like for all of you? And do you have any maybe like tips, tricks, or advice you didn't take and are really happy you didn't?
Okay, I'll go. So fundraising has been I'm fundraising right now, so I'm in the middle of it. One of the things that I have been doing is I found out there's a lot of rich professors out there that also invest. And so building an education company is one of the things that I did really, really well, was like I just found all the really, like, they've been publishing all these things and they got a lot of funding. So I found educators to fund my company, and that is one of the ways that I'm kind of using to keep the impact face on and really continue to have that as part of our core, also on our cap table and then also on our team. But being young, being 24 years old, being a person of color, being an immigrant, I wear so many hats that say no. And so for me, going out and fundraising, and one of the questions I get all the time, well, are you a teacher? I'm like, well, I was a student. Well, like, so for me, sometimes it's always kind of weird seeing that a lot of investors would like overlook my experience, and then I talk to my teacher entrepreneurs, and then they're overlooking their experience too. And so sometimes it gets to a point where it's like, well, what kind of profile do you want me to be? And for me, going through Headstream was like, before Headstream, I was just like, hey, whoever is gonna say yes, green money is green money, no matter where it's coming from. But now I've been very, very intentional around who I'm reaching out to. But the other thing that I wanted to bring up, as I found as a concern in the fundraising community, is that a lot of investors are quote unquote impact investors, but we don't talk about impact in those meetings. That's something that I've seen a lot as I'm literally right now currently fundraising, is that obviously, again, you have to be sustainable. I talked about that a little bit earlier, but sometimes for me, going into some of these conversations, I would love to talk to you about how our youth who would use our platform, what kind of impact they're gonna be having. And some of those conversations don't come until later in the conversation. And so I'm looking out extra hard for those people, but then it's also a really hard time to fundraise. So I feel like we're in a crossroad of like, do I just take money because it's just money, and continue keeping my Headstream mission and like all the things that I've learned over here, or do I keep the lights on and take on people that might not really care too much about what we're doing, and they just care about maybe the bottom line. So those are some of the just comments I wanted to add on to this conversation.
100%. We were just talking about this before. Innovation. Innovation is needed not just in tech companies, but in VC, in fundraising models. I love that you mentioned you're working with foundations. That's an area where we've started to look into and work with. I just got back from Detroit. I had a chance to go to the Forbes conference there and meet a bunch of fantastic folks, especially in the area of finance. And there have been so many young people who are starting to work in that field and really look at the models that investors use. And I met this one young woman who's awesome. She made the Forbes 30 under 30 list. She was one of the only women who worked at this big hedge fund in New York. She made, I think, over $3 billion for her clients last year. So like, she's awesome. She's so smart. And what she was saying is a lot of these traditional VC models are based on science from 100 years ago. There hasn't been any innovation. Like, it should not just be a one-size-fits-all financial model. We need to be looking at things like, how is the market, changing growth, or, how a B2C, right, direct-to-consumer company is different than a company that's working with the schools and then to the students, and I just have not seen that in BC. And to go to your point as well around like the impact investors, they also should be having models that prioritize impact. It's not just in the conversations, but I've also seen it in the diligence, which I know is a privilege even to get to the point of being in diligence. And investors, we can see what you're doing in our data rooms. I don't think they always realize that, but we can see. If you're just looking at my financial models and you're not looking at anything around my clinical impact, you're not looking at anything around my product or my team or the testimonials and what kids have to say about this, you're not an impact investor because you don't care about those things. You're just looking at the finance. So we can tell as founders, and yeah, I mean, it's a tough choice. Do you take the money or do you not? I don't have the answer, but it's definitely something that's, I think a lot of us as founders have been coming together to talk about and saying, hey, there's a real issue here, especially for folks who are young women, who are people of color, who are not, second-time founders who have already gone through an exit or who are older. It's really hard for us, and I don't think it should be, because there are so many amazing companies up here. Like, they deserve to have all the funding that they want.
Am I the only nonprofit? No. Who else is a nonprofit? Or no? Okay, maybe on this stage I am. Novelly's, so Novelly's structured as a 501c3 organization, and I think with the nonprofit business model, right? Like, it's like you're trying to make a pie and you're just like trying out a million different recipes, like which percentage is coming from philanthropy, which percentage is coming from like major donors, smaller donors, licensing, fee for service. Like, you're trying to find the ideal combination that can just keep you running and like is still aligned with your mission and what your actual offerings are. And also is in line with the kind of capacity you have, right? And to be totally frank, we're still figuring it out. It's like a journey, and we're still figuring out the recipe. But something that has been really helpful is just like niche communities, like Headstream, where it's all centered around like youth and wellness and digital spaces. And then Fast Forward is a community for like tech-centered nonprofits, and that's what we identify as. So like being in community and conversation with people who have either similar goals like Headstream or are centered around similar models like Fast Forward. Like, I think if we have more of these, like, we're able to like just figure it out together because it's all new. It's like really new conversations. Like, what does it mean to be a tech-centered nonprofit and to have all of your offerings be totally digital? Like, that's new for the philanthropy space as well. And like, how can we help each other out and like figure out what this new world or like these new models are all going to look like eventually. So I really appreciate and hope that we can have more, like whether it takes the form of an accelerator like Headstream and Fast Forward, or it takes the form of, like convenings, like conferences, whatever it is. Like I'd love to see more of that, that like gathers like innovations together.
This is such a juicy conversation. I think we need to talk more about stuff like this. I think what's coming up for me is, so my company, Close Gap, is also structured as a nonprofit. And so what we have to look at is kind of this really antiquated philanthropic funding model that really needs to be overhauled. And there are like so many fabulous people who are leading that work, and I think we'll get there somewhat soon. But something that I've come up against is it's not only that like venture capital is old school and philanthropy is old school and all the funding systems that we have are terribly broken. It's also entity structure, like the legal structure of an innovation has a huge impact on what funding is available, what models are being used to evaluate the innovation itself. And so we're constrained by the entity structures that exist right now. So for-profits aren't enough, nonprofits aren't enough, we have B Corps, we have public benefit, none of that's enough. Like, we need to keep innovating even in the legal structure of a company, because we are constrained by that. As innovators, we're constrained by that, and it's not only the funding. The funding is just an extra layer of complexity on top of that. And so I think that's what comes up for me, and something at Close Gap that we've considered is, okay, well, we're structured as a nonprofit and we're 100% mission driven. That's why we're here. That's why we're a nonprofit, you know? So, and you can be a little bit of both, and that's why you might choose like a social enterprise, but we're very much a nonprofit. And we want the ability to have access to more funding. And so something we consider is potentially doing a hybrid structure where there is some sort of for-profit arm that opens us up to additional channels of funding and also enables us to give equity to team members. So that's a huge thing too, is that the way that you're structured dictates even the compensation packages that you can offer. And that has a huge impact on the way that our innovations get to market. So if you can only attract, and I hate to use these phrases like A player, B player, C player, but just for simplicity's sake, I'm going to utilize those now, but there's far more nuance there. But if you are only able to attract C and B players, then your innovation and the impact that you are able to have will be limited to that. And so something as nonprofits and all mission-driven companies, we need to be able to attract the talent that will help us get there, because we know at the end of the day, it's all human capital. And so this is just all to say, like, the funding landscape, our legal structures, our entity structures, we are constrained by all of this, and there needs to be innovation all over the place.
Yeah, totally agree with all that. And related but different, one thing that really bothers me, sorry if this offends anyone, but going back to structures and all that, the amount of time and dollars we as early innovators end up spending on legal stuff is so frustrating when those dollars could be going to impact. So I totally agree that we need to rethink that from top to bottom, and I honestly don't know whose job that is to do. I know lawyers aren't incentivized to do that work, but I think that's, you know, a drum worth beating from this channel and everyone that is involved in it. But I don't have any answers to your question, Danny, but just to share a little bit about our experience, we're a little bit unique in that we've been around for 6.5 years. We have several other products that are in the market that are doing well, and we've been completely organically grown to date. So that's been really awesome. And on the other side, we know if we were able to harness some more capital, we could definitely push our foot on the gas a little bit faster. And that very question which you were sharing or posed is what we're wrestling with now, in that we've been able to have impact be our primary motivator. And when we are talking with VC, we've been lucky to have, you know, some great conversations, and we see some of the things that you're all seeing. It's like, well, are we willing to give up that control that we have to know that we're doing the right thing on the right path? So that's where we're really looking for more of that social impact, but I think finding the right social impact is really challenging. So welcome any conversations if folks want to have that, or have insights on their own journey. Would love to learn from you all as well.
I have a minor comment, which is more, again, this like systemic problem that happens in this space, and minor trigger warning for something I'm about to say. I was reading this Forbes article recently that was a recap. If anyone's interested, I can find it and pull it up after. The researcher did a study, and they were looking at news coverage of women founders and men founders. And they said women founders, like these takedown CEO articles, and the women founders like Emily Weiss, Steph Corey, I think, in a way. And it was women founders, when they're in these takedown articles, it's all about communication and like low pay. And for men, it's like murder and assault. And women, it happens like within the first few years of the business existing. And for men, it's like 10 years after the thing has happened and they got paid off their severance and they lived happily ever after. And one of the deeper pieces of this article, of this research, which I read in a different article, was just around the fact, and I'm living this experience as like a Black queer woman founder in this space, is the fact that folks join your team, to the piece around equity is what made me think about this. People join the team because they believe in the vision and the mission. And when you're building products like we all are, it's like if you have people who get it, they are in forever. And then when you layer in all the intersections of identities, which make it harder to fundraise, most especially, like, I am not a Zoogler, like an ex-Googler. I have like literally no logos that like most people. I went to the new school, which most people don't even know what that is. It's in New York. It's Parsons. Yeah. Okay, cool. Good. Yeah, it's like, I mean, like, but a lot of VCs don't know it. They're like, what is this red, like, fake logo she put in her deck? And one of the things I've been talking about with a lot of my other founder friends who are in this space and like have like intersecting identities that make it harder is that we get people to buy in and they're like in it and they love it. And then like, 12 months, 18 months, it's like, they're like, cool, but I need a raise. And it's like, we need to be able to both fundraise and get people to buy in the mission. That's like the startup story, but we're also living in very different times where equity across the board for everybody who's on the team is there. Like, we should be able to pay our team members market rate on day one as a startup, not because like we have a friend who works in VC and like gave us a $5 million first check, but because the investors who are able to invest in us also are able to deploy capital in that way. And again, it's a systemic thing where it's like both on the founder side, on the VC side, they have certain quotas that they need to reach, both, or not quotas, sorry, but like capital, like ownership targets that they need to reach. And if things don't align there, it's just this game of like smoke where we can't really like have a direct conversation about like, cool, like if you could give me $1 million more, and that's all it takes to get it across the line with your team, but they don't tell you that, it becomes this harder conversation. So I don't know that I have a full thought in that, but read the article. It's fascinating stuff, very saddening also.
That sounds like a
yeah.
full thought. I was like,
Period.
we just barely scratched the surface, but these are the conversations that we want to continue and we want to have. They're very important. And if you're starting to realize Headstream's not just one thing, it's like there's multi-layers here. And these are really the change makers that are redefining this system. And so I encourage you all to de-risk your minds when you are speaking to these innovators, because they are all going against this traditional grain, and they are truly transforming the way the digital world works for youth. And so I just would love to end with maybe each of you saying, how can individuals at this lovely festival plug in with the work that you're doing?
Just because I have it doesn't mean I have to go first. Well, it's easy for you. So, no, I'm happy to start. I think one thing that's been really interesting, I guess not surprising knowing Headstream, is just the connections that continue to snowball afterwards. In that, I'm pretty confident that some of the people I've met here today are going to lead to some really meaningful conversations that might help us look at something different, lead to a new partnership, lead to a new investment, or whatever it might be. And I think of meeting with you, Rachel, and we had a mutual connection that we connected that's been really helpful for her. And I hope we can continue snowballing again as an ecosystem. And I think what it all comes down to is being able and willing to network. It's nice to be able to do in person, as great as it was virtually, but I think that's what we're all here to do. And I'm super excited for the happy hour. I'm super excited to, connect in between sessions. And I hope we can all do that with the goal of rising all of the tides collectively.
+1 on that. I am searchable on the internet. It's Mika Lejean. I'm on the bottom left corner. Find me on not Twitter, but LinkedIn, Instagram. If you want to get access to Idoru, our Instagram is Idoru, IDORU.world. If you send a DM and say like open sesame, I just met Mika, I'll get you access.
Love it. Let's see. Well, so Close Gap is structured as a nonprofit. We know that. We're raising $1 million in philanthropic capital right now. We have about $250K committed. So if you're interested in funding our work, please do. We need it, as we've been discussing. So you can find out more about that at closegap.org, or you can email me directly at rachel@closegap.org. And if you're an educator, if you know an educator, if you are tapped into the public school system. Our product is 100% free. So schools can go and sign up as many students, as many school staff. If they're a district, they can sign up as many schools. There's no training required. So you can implement the digital mental health check-in tool today. You can get started, and schools that have implemented Close Gap have uncovered cases of suicide ideation, suicidal planning, that we were able to intervene on before something bad happened. So I just, if you're tapped into the education system and, a school that isn't utilizing a tool like this yet, please go and utilize it. It is free. It is for you. Thank you.
We're also fundraising. I forgot to say that.
Everyone. We're all fundraising. Everyone is fundraising. So our Substack is structured as a book club. So if you love to read, our Substack publication, which is essentially a newsletter, but it highlights all of the ebooks that are coming out. It also is attached to lesson plan resources as well as podcast episodes. Really great. You have students who are talking about the ebooks and discussing them in a very intellectual way. So that's one way if you want to plug in. I'm also very findable, anna@novelly.org. You can find me on LinkedIn, Instagram, or also just email me. I'm local, so if you'd love to have a conversation, also happy to meet in person or virtually. Love talking about being a tech-forward nonprofit. Everything we do is online. Love talking about the power of storytelling and literature and our ability to heal and liberate ourselves. But I guess outside of it too, I'm also a writer and a healer, so can connect in that regard as well outside of work because we are full human beings. And this is something I really care about, but have had to learn that it's not who I am. But join our Substack if you wanna see what the kind of work that we do and get involved in a small way.
Yeah, I think that image says it all. That's how you can find me. I see people taking pictures. Awesome. You can find me on LinkedIn. That's probably the best way to connect on social because I don't really have personal socials. I don't know if that's a thing that you get from journalists sometimes. They're like, let me link your Instagram. And I'm like, don't have one. It's just a couple pictures of my dog. Do the company one. But the company has social, so that's at Neoth, neolth.com, or a handle is just Neoth. And I think LinkedIn is the best way to find me. We have an app on the App Store, so anybody ages 11 plus can download it. We also have a free tool for educators. So there's about a lot of lesson plans that we've been making in partnership with the Department of Education. We have some of our first RCTs, so clinical trials going with those lesson plans, integrating into health class. So there's a free tool for educators as well that you can find at neoth.com. And hope to see you all soon.
Awesome. So as everybody has been saying, you can find me on LinkedIn, Instagram, or Twitter. I'm also on there. We're also raising 1.5 million. We're 40% subscribed already. So we're pretty much moving very, very fast. If there's anybody who would love to be part of this journey, I'd love to talk to you. But also if you're an educator or just plugged into the K-12 system, we're going to be launching this spring, and I'm so excited to start actually working and getting things done here this next year. So I'm really excited about that. And then the other thing is, if any other entrepreneurs, like we all talked to earlier, everybody's fundraising. We should build a little Headstream fundraising community, just throwing that out there, and see how we can help each other. So very excited to see you guys at the networking events and just through the conference. Appreciate y'all.
Well, thank you so much to all of you. You know that you can find all of these innovators on the Headstream website as well. And unfortunately, we didn't have enough time for Q&A, but the nice thing is that we made them accessible enough that feel free to ask them questions. But can we just give them a round of applause, and thank you so much for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your day, everyone. The next session is going to be the Digital Delta funding landscape, which will be in here. So we'll do a quick switch. If If you want to join the digital health impact rotation, that'll be downstairs in the spring room. So thanks again.